should there be shielding or no shielding on power cords? John in Grand Rapids, Michigan wants to know, and he says, after doing some research on power cables, I am completely confused. I don't blame you. Some say shielding is only necessary for digital components like CD players, DACs, streamers, music servers, etc. And that analog amps and preamps should be unshielded power cords. Some claim shielded power cords on amps and preamps reduce dynamic range and can result in a dead-sounding system. Can you break this down and eliminate the confusion before I invest in power cords or kill myself? Thanks. In fairness to John, I added that last little bit, but sometimes we want to just put an ice pick through our head. You know, here's the thing. Sometimes a little bit of information goes too far. Now, I will give you some examples. I've done years of work on power cables. In fact, I was one of the very first people in our industry to introduce a high-end power cable. And certainly in my ever so humble opinion, I think I was the first person to really introduce a great power cable. And that was years and years ago, called the lab cable. And there's a whole story about it I could and probably should share with people over time, because up to that time there were high-end aspiring high-end power cables, but I don't think any of them really succeeded. And the reason I bring this up is because way back then I started doing a lot of work in researching what sounded good, what didn't sound good. And I found the exact same thing, that tightly shielded power cables were kind of constricted. Worse was, during those, that was in the 90s. So during the 90s, there was a big deal about putting giant ferrite beads on power cables. And oh my gosh, there was, I don't remember the names of the companies, but there were plenty of them that said, you know, this really cleans it up. And in fact, it does. A big ferrite clamp, you know, the kind you see on the back of computer cables. There are these little round things that kind of like donuts that go over the cable. Well, they're very effective at lowering radiated emissions and high frequencies in cables. But boy, do they suck the life out of the music when hooked up to a stereo system. And so now, with that piece of information, I just formed an opinion for you. Yep, shielding constricts the sound, and ferrite beads do even worse to the sound. And if that's all you ever heard, now you're going to go out into the world and say, nope, don't want any kind of shielded power cables. And you would be wrong. So the subject is broad and deep. Here's, like anything, the story behind it is different than you might think. All of our power cables are shielded, and yet our power cables never sound constricted. Why is that? Well, when you start looking at what happens, you discover quickly that shielding is a benefit because, hey, this stereo equipment, coming out of the back here from the power cable, it radiates down that power cable a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, it makes a lot of noise. I'll have to do for you someday the experiment where I show you with a little noise sniffer how much noise is actually coming out of here, and it's very noisy. So you definitely want to shield it because you don't want to contaminate everything else in the system with all this noise from the diode bridges in here and all the currents that are switching. They make a lot of radiated emissions. So you want shielded power cables, but you want them shielded correctly. So the right way to shield a power cable is to only connect it at one end so that the shield is connected at the male end and not at the female end. That's step number one. Step number two, make sure the shield is far enough away from the conductors. Now, I'm giving you all my secrets here. So you just don't want the shield too close to the conductor. So you want to get a good 1/4 inch 1/2 inch if you can, and you can do that any number of ways. We did that by, I think we wrapped cotton or something around it and just built up a layer so that the shield was far away from the conductors. So, and then we would use like triple shields because we wanted to have really good shielding on that. Now, I recommend properly shielded cables for everything. And that's why you'll see when you buy a PS Audio cable, everything is shielded, but it's shielded correctly. And there's a big difference between taking and making dogma that any shielded cable I've tried just, constricts the sound. Well, that may be true, but that doesn't make it a universal truth. Okay? So there you go. Shield them cables, baby. Just ask the manufacturer how it's shielded. How close is it to the conductors? Is it tied to both ends of the grounds on the cables or just one, like it should be? And with those answers, you can make some intelligent decisions. Good luck with your system. Take it easy.